Okay, welcome everyone to Demise's Guide to Judging Artifacts. Now, this is something that I see a lot of the time. New players will always ask these questions, so I'm going to go ahead and try to answer them definitively and give everyone a nice guide to judging your artifacts. So, without further ado, let's get started. So, what are artifacts? So, artifacts are basically these kind of rare items. Basically, they take the form of a base item and then you imbue it with additional properties. So in Crawl, you might see something like a ring that is like a protection ring, but it also gives you things like fire resistance or magic resistance or cold resistance or some negative effect. Doesn't matter. But essentially, they usually are points of discussion and decision making within for a player because you want to kind of see if that thing fits you first. Um, So there's two types of artifacts, an unrandart and a randart. So a randart is short for random artifact, is one that is completely randomly generated. You'll never see the same randart, or at least the same names, um, twice. Like you'll always see like different prefixes, different stats, different bases, etc., etc. An unrandart is a hard-coded, pre-generated, I guess, item that is possible to find in multiple games, so it's pretty cool. They usually come with some upside and some downside. I won't talk too much about whether or not unrandarts are good because I think that that comes with experience, and generally speaking, a lot of them are just not that good. But you'll come to learn how to judge them in the first place. Now, one thing I just want to point out before we start is something that bothers me a lot. A lot of people talk about luck with respect to artifacts. You do not need to win. You do not need artifacts to win the game. Okay, they are not a necessary part of the game. I have beaten the game with no artifacts before. It's doable. It's very doable, in fact. I tried to make the point when I first made my Minotaur Berserker tutorial, but you do not have bad luck just because you're not getting any useful artifacts. Okay, it's not that big of a deal. You can win without it. It seems like it'd be easier to win with it, but it's actually just you relying too heavily on RNG, and it's not a great mindset to have. So saying that you have bad luck because you have no artifacts is just a nonsense statement. So let's talk about how to judge artifacts. So basically, since artifacts can be pretty much everything except a enhancer staff, every single type, you have a couple of different things to look at. So for weapons and for armor, you look at the base type of weapon or armor, and then you look at the enchantment first. So the reason why this is the case is because you actually cannot enchant an armor or you can't enchant armor or weapons that are artifacts. They are set with their enchantment. So a weapon that is necessarily not a great weapon, even though it has good prefixes in the artifact, is still not something you would ordinarily use. For example, if you got like a dagger with great stuff like RLX, RF plus, RC plus, Slay plus 2, something like that, but it was just a dagger of venom. If you're a full melee fighter, you're not switching to that dagger like really late in the game. However, keep in mind that artifacts can be used and then ditched just like every other item. So if the item is useful for your character, it's relevant to your character surviving, it's stronger than your current weapon, then switch to it first. But don't necessarily invest all your skills into it because it might not necessarily be the thing you end up with. There are some items that you will definitely understand that you will end up with, and those generally tend to be high enchantment, really positive um, bases. Sorry, high enchantment, very positive things, properties of the artifact, and the base actual item is really good as well. So, for example, if you got a plate armor that was like plus 10, plus 15, or something like that, something crazy, and it gave you like really good stuff, you would consider using that as your late game stuff. But not all artifacts are going to carry you to the late game. Keep that in mind. Now, if you're asking whether or not an artifact that you find on the ground, like a weapon, for example, is relevant to your character, think about what you're training and how painful your switch will be. If you're using unarmed combat and you got it to like 15, you don't want to go and switch for like a whip, for example. It's just a waste of EXP. Switching, training all that stuff for unarmed and then just ditching it for the whip is completely pointless, and the whip generally won't be too great anyway. Even if I find a great endgame weapon, like an executioner's axe, something crazy like that, that's really good, if I already have a skill, a main weapon invested that isn't axes, I will not switch unless there's some mad cross training. And the only reason why is because it's good to be disciplined in those cases, because most of the time you'll be really weak when you're trying to switch and you'll end up dying. So that's one thing that I just want to point out. More generally though, the way that I like to look at the artifact, and I think the way that you should look at artifacts, is you should try to categorize the properties of an artifact that can happen into good, neutral, and item killers, or run killers. I think this is a bit of a mistake. So the good things are generally going to be outweighed by the instant item killers. And I say item killers, but I also mean run killers. And by run killer, I mean it will literally kill your run if you use this item. It has a good potential to just straight up kill your run. Oftentimes it doesn't matter at all how many good things are stacked on one item. You can actually have an instant item killer that will basically mean you do not use that thing. And I will talk a little bit about this later on. Now the neutral things can and should be ignored when comparing two items together, but they can be a small positive or negative if you're not. So a neutral thing is something like, you know, RN plus or whatever, right? It's just something that it looks cool, but for a new player, but once you get more experience, you'll realize that they don't really matter at all. They can be a small positive in terms of looking at when you're just like saying, oh, is this a good item in general? But when you compare it, you should not try to compare all the neutral things because they generally aren't useful at all, and they are of such small consideration that you should generally just have a good thing straight up outweigh them. Like, don't worry about it. So let's talk about good and the neutral and the run killers. So the good stuff, and I got my thumbs up right here. That's me, by the way. Wink. So the good stuff you'll generally see is RLEC, RPoise, RF plus, all the way to 3 plus potentially, RC plus again to 3, and then MR plus or sometimes plus plus. And these are significantly better when you have none of them. So if you don't have RPoise, for example, if you get an RPoise artifact, it's got a slight increase in like how good the item is. If you have no RF and RC, and this is a great weapon generally, or an armor or whatever, it's a great just like base item, then you generally want to keep that as well. MR plus is always nice to have, but I think it's the least effective. RLEC is generally something that I will keep a side weapon for, even if the side weapon is slightly worse than my normal weapon, just because I want the RLEC. So that's the kind of thing that you would expect to see from a good artifact. You'll also get, if you also get a slaying bonus of 1 to 6, which is I believe the max, that's also quite good. I think that slaying is very good on certain items, but it's not it's very good, don't get me wrong, but I think that it's very rare and you should try not to be blinded by the plus slaying. I think that you should think about the good things as how can they help my character rather than, you know, oh, it's a really good thing, I better put it on. You should really try to focus on what is my character missing? Does this fill in that critical gap? Because if it doesn't, then don't put too much emphasis on the artifact itself. Unless, of course, it's a good weapon, you know, good brand, good base, good enchantment, etc., and so forth. Don't think too much about these good things, but they are definitely very good if you get them. Alright, so the neutral stuff. This kind of stuff is the kind of stuff that, again, you would not really care too much about, but at the same time, so they're either good or bad. You can either manage them, or they don't really matter at all. And the two big ones that I want to talk about first is stats and RN. RN will help you reduce torment and some draining. It is probably the most overstated resistance in the entire freaking game. It is really overstated. RN is not necessary, guys. It is not necessary. In a 3-room game, even in a 5-room game, you don't even touch like torment until the orb room. It's not necessary. Absolutely not necessary. So if you see RN on a thing, completely ignore it. It doesn't matter, okay? I just want you to completely ignore it and trust me on this, it will work. RN should not be a consideration. Stats is another thing that's amazingly overstated. Stats are a meme. It's very simple. Just remember that and you'll be fine. Even if you get strength plus 11, if the artifact isn't good, it's not good. The 11 strength will never make up for that much, whatever garbage you're using. Right? Stats are really, really a neutral thing. Even if they have minus stats, it doesn't matter. Don't worry about the stats. There are only 2 real small exceptions. The first one is if you get a huge int bonus on a mage, that's pretty useful because int is very powerful on magic. Secondly, if you're going to go brain dead or stat drain to hell to 0 or negatives, don't use the artifact. It's common sense, guys. Like, if you have a Minotaur Berserker and he's got 5 int, don't wear a -6 int ring. It's simple. Like, come on. I don't need to mention those cases, but I will because it's it's a very common thing to do. You guys, not you guys, sorry. There are guys out there that will randomly wear things that bring them down to 1 stat, and they're like, "What the hell? I got drained to death." It's not that smart. Like, just keep that in mind. But everything else, stats don't matter. Just don't worry about stats, and you'll play much better. Trust me. Don't focus on stats. Focus on your other things. So the other neutral things that we talk about are stealth plus or minus, completely pointless. Just don't worry about it at all. On a stealth character, they don't matter. On a non-stealth character, they don't matter. So it really doesn't matter. Arc Corrosion, that's the one that I was actually thinking isn't a neutral. Arc Corrode is really quite good if you have none, but the thing is they tend to be somewhat ish common because of rings of corrosion resistance. So if you have it, good. But don't treat it, like I said, don't treat it as if it's really important. It's like the closest thing I would put towards the good side. Yeah, so Arc Road, generally good. Stealth plus minus, absolutely neutral. Don't worry about it at all. This is what I mean. Don't consider these things. They're not important. Plus Rage, plus Invis, plus Blink. These ones are not very important at all. Generally speaking, you have to get evocations to get them to work. They have a flat, fixed, fairly high hunger meter. So if you have like invisibility, if you're trying to spam that stuff, you'll take a lot of hunger up, I guess, and you'll have to train evocations. They are useful in certain scenarios, but I would absolutely never think about them as important for a artifact, just because it's rarely ever going to be applicable. Particularly the plus rage, you don't really need that. And these ones, the next ones, curse, contam. So the apostrophe, curse, apostrophe, contam, and apostrophe drain all act when you try to take off the item. So curse will automatically will automatically curse an item the second you wear it. So you have to use remove curse to get rid of it. Contamination will, when you take it off, you get yellow contaminated, which potentially gives you one mutation, usually malmutation, so bad mutations. And drain will red drain you upon taking off the item, which is really quite devastating in certain cases of like the early game, but otherwise it's not really that relevant. Now, the thing about these three is that if there is a good artifact and it has any of these three, it usually does not mean anything because these only apply when you take the actual thing off. So if you have something like a Slay plus 6, AC plus 4, Dex plus 5, RF plus ring, and it's got drain and contam and curse on, you should not care at all because you're keeping that thing on for life. It's not going to be a thing that you take off. Usually, artifacts that are that good will be permanent in the first place. And even if they're not that good, you can take a one-off shot to take it off. As long as you're not actively you don't actively need to hot swap the item. Like, say for example, you have a weapon and you want to switch to a stabbing weapon, though that's really not a great idea. Or you have a melee weapon and a ranged weapon. Unless you have some situation like that, these three don't matter at all. So just don't worry about it. I like how I've got the image of the guy shrugging there, the meme, and like as I'm talking, I'm kind of shrugging and holding my hands out as well. This is exactly how I feel about these neutrals. They don't matter at all. Now, these ones are these bad things are the run killers, as I referred to earlier. These are the things that if you have it on an artifact, literally it's easier for you to simply just drop the item, like just straight up drop it. It's not important anymore. Don't worry about it. Just don't think about it. There are very few exceptions to this. For example, minus telly, that really doesn't matter if you are a Formicid, for example, or a Berserk. Oh, I forgot it. Oh, no, yeah, plus rage. There you go. Like, that's like the only real exception, or you have insanely good items and then you can cover for it. But realistically, if you see an artifact with this, just don't look at it. Don't be tempted by it because they can potentially just straight up kill your run. And I put this in like kind of an order, a little bit of an order. It's not too set in stone, but I just want to talk about them from top to bottom because I find that the top ones tend to be much more painful than the bottom ones. So RF minus, RC minus, MR minus. Now these ones are the absolute item killers for me. Like I will not use an item with any of these properties. The reason why is because with RF and RC minus, if you have a red tick, so if you have RF minus, like negative resistance, you take double damage from any source of fire or cold or whatever. That's insane. That's a huge amount of damage. So a bolt of fire from an orb of fire can do like what, 48, 50, 60 damage. It's hitting you for 120. You're gonna die in 2 turns. You're not gonna live. RC, exactly the same thing. Bolts of cold will hurt. Imagine if an ice fiend gets you and you have RC minus. You're dead. I've seen myself take 85 damage from those bastards back in the day. Imagine doubling that. Like 170 damage on a bolt of cold. That's not something I want to see. Anyway, and even if you have RC plus and then you bring it down to RC negative, you're actually still taking double damage from what you would have normally been taking if you had RC plus. Because RC plus 1 pip will give you 50% damage reduction, and if you have none, you'll have 100% damage. So you're you're taking an extra 100% if you think about it, percentage wise. So don't do it. MR minus I also really dislike. MR minus is very painful to have. It means that you're very vulnerable to hexes, you're vulnerable to a banishment, you're vulnerable to like confusion, paralysis, blah blah blah, petrification, etc., etc., so forth. It just isn't fun. Don't do it. It's not worth your time. Okay, so on to apostrophe, not apostrophe, asterisk telly. So this refers to uncontrolled teleportation. So it will give you the same as teleportitis. I'm actually not sure if this is still a thing, but I will backdate this somewhat. So I haven't seen a telly in a while, so maybe it's gone. I haven't actually checked. But teleportitis in general, more, I guess, if you get the mutation as well, it's not good. Don't have it as much as you can. It's not a thing you want to have. Randomly teleporting towards enemies is horrible. Don't do it. So rings of teleportation, bad. I'm actually, like I said, I'm not sure if if that's still a thing. It might not be now that I think about it, just because I haven't seen it. So minus telly is removes all teleportation and in general stasis. Sorry, no, in general movement stasis. No, okay. How do I make this more clear? You cannot blink, controlled or uncontrolled. You cannot telly. That is terrible. This is a very, very, very bad debuff because it will make sure that your character has only haste as their defensive option. That's not a good idea. Minus telly, bad stuff. Noise. Noise is not as big of a deal. I don't like it though. Noisy items tend to attract a lot of enemies onto your screen when you don't want it, and it can lead to some very bad situations. So I don't like it either. Like I said, I would put that as a run killer. Sorry, I think that it's less of a run killer than the 3 above, but it's still quite bad. I think that the Frostbite axe, the Unrandart, look it up if you wish, has noisy in it, and I thought that I didn't really like it because of that noise as well. Random Rage, so Berserkitis, that's not horrible, but it's still kind of bad, depending on what kind of character you are. If you're a character that is really tanky and can like survive while Berserk and actually make use of Berserk, it's not bad. But for someone like a stabber or a range character that has a pretty weak melee, Rage is just not that good because Rage will pretty much force you to be in the fight, and once you can't escape while you're in that fight, and once you go out of Berserk, you'll be slowed, so you put yourself at a disadvantage. It can also screw really badly. There's another one that I forgot here, Random Corrosion. This one I don't think is too big of a deal, but it's also a run killer, so it just randomly corrodes you on time. Oh, I completely forgot, there's also another one. Huh. That sucks. There's also Random Slow. So Random Slow, what that does is there's a percentage chance of slowing you every single time you're in combat. That one's also really bad. Sorry, I pretty much had to like make this up as I got home, so I haven't got all the stuff checked. But generally speaking, it's covering most of it. So Slay, -1 to 6. This is also pretty bad, but like I said, it's not. It can be acceptable if the slaying is not too bad, and if your character has enough slaying or whatnot. But in general, I'm not a fan of slaying. So yeah, so let me just recap. So telly, noise, rage, slow, and oh, confused. Oh man, I missed a lot. Sorry, these are the new ones. Clearly I haven't really remembered the new ones because I just automatically block them out. So the three ones that I haven't mentioned in this slide are Confuse, Slow, and Corrode, and these are all pretty bad, so I don't suggest that you use them either. They're all run killers. So the common mistakes that I see people make on when judging artifacts in general, and you can easily tell, excuse me, because they have the artifacts on them in their morgue file. They usually wear them, and then sometimes they even actually have an item that's straight up better in their inventory that they don't wear, and I'm like, why are you doing this to me? So, first common mistake that I would say is focusing way too hard on the neutral stuff, like either positive or negative. Thinking this is particularly important when it comes to stats. The stats thing is just such a meme, guys. At this point, it's a meme and it needs to die. Stats don't matter, okay? Just don't worry about them. They will, like, I have seen a lot of people use like just a garbage weapon in general, like a plus something mace, like just a mace, because it has like plus 11 strength. There's no need for that. There's absolutely no need. It's not a good weapon. If it's not a good weapon, then don't worry about the neutrals. The neutrals don't matter at all. And like flowing on from that, they hold on to garbage way too long for some good or neutral trait that does more harm than good. For example, if you have like a flail, a +6 flail of venom, and it has RN double plus, RF plus plus, R poise, RC plus, that's still a flail. It's a +6 flail. It's good in the early game, yes, but that doesn't mean that it's good later on. You should be looking to find something better. I know it's painful to part with good artifacts, but you have to understand that artifacts have a limited, an expiry date, essentially. If it's not a good artifact, it's not a good artifact. Some artifacts are good enough to last you the entire game. Others are just not good enough. And holding on to that garbage are things that weaken your character fundamentally, even though it looks cool. So, practice discipline, guys. Practice discipline. Think about your artifacts. Don't just leave them on like no-brainers, especially if they're like something like your main weapon, or if they're like leather armor or something. Think about, when can I replace this thing? When does it happen? When is the turning point where the items of the dungeon in general, or the items that I can see and create, are better than the things that I have? Don't just hold on to something because it's an artifact. And finally, the most obvious one that I've mentioned based on what I've shown here is using run killers without extreme caution. I'm not saying that you absolutely can never use these run killers, but make sure that you have some kind of countermeasure. If you have RF minus, get RF double plus, so that you at least have RF plus. Don't try to make your character weaker for no reason. If you have minus telly, like, you better be damn sure you're careful. Damn sure, because you're not going to be able to run away. You can't. If you have like random rage, then make sure that every fight you have is absolutely like under your control. If you have slow, make sure you have haste or blink or teleport ready. If you have confused, make sure you have a lot of curing. It's the same thing. Use these artifacts with run killers extremely cautiously. I'm calling them run killers because they're run killers. I'm not calling them run killers because they're like painkillers. Yeah? They're there to kill you. Don't use them. They're the bad egg. Alright. So, without further ado, let's get into a pop quiz. Like, you guys think you guys are hot stuff? Let's take a look. So what I want you guys to do here is I'm going to show you guys some artifacts. I want you guys to just quickly pause the video, think about if they're good or bad, and then unpause and listen to this, I have to say. So the first one is the +4 pair of gloves. Guess who sucks? RLEC RC plus in +4. So I'm going to let you pause the video right here. Alright, that's enough pause. So now let's look at what this glove represents, right? This is a +4 pair of gloves. Gloves normally come in +2 max enchant. This is an insanely good pair of gloves. Just for the +4, it's 2 AC for free. It has RLEC, RC plus, and in +4. In +4 is not relevant. Don't worry about that one. If we're a mage, fine, it's nice. Whatever. RLEC is really good. RC plus is generally decent. RF plus we prefer more, but RC is fine as well. For +4 gloves, there is no downside to wearing these gloves. It's really damn good. Use it. The next one I'm going to show you is +11 hand axe, ultra sucks, venom, RN +++, strength +5. What do you guys think? I'm going to pause it right now. Okay, so this hand axe is just as bad as the person that it's referring to. All right, it's deceptively bad. So this is a plus 11 hand axe. Now a hand axe can go, or any weapon in general can go up to plus 9 unless it's an artifact. So this plus 11 is really high slaying. Now the problem with this is that at the end of the day, it's a hand axe of venom. It's not going to punch through the enemies you want it to punch through when the time comes. It's not a horrible weapon, but I would much prefer to have a battle axe over this piece of crap. It's got RN triple plus, which is literally the meme, like, and strength plus 5. Those two are neutrals. You do not consider them when judging your artifacts. This is a plus 11 hand axe of venom. It is not great for using it in past the early game. In the early game, yeah, it's great, it's perfect, whatever. It's fine. It's a plus 11 hand axe, it's good. But when you get a battle axe or you get an executioner's axe, you'll find that the damage is way higher. And you'll be able to pick your brand too, so branding will be really important. And finally, let's look at this one, the plus 4 battle axe of donations to Demise. Speed, strength minus 4, slay plus 2, MR plus. I'm going to pause the video right now. Okay, so let's look at this one. So this battle axe is plus 4, right? Plus 4. So keep that in mind. It also has slay plus 2, so it gives us 2 extra slaying. It has MR. These are all good things. These are all the good things. Strength minus 4, again, common misconception. Don't worry about the strength. It doesn't matter. Okay, strength minus 4, we'll ignore it. The real qualifying factor for this weapon is the fact that it's a battle axe of speed. A battle axe of speed is an insane weapon. Even without the slay plus 2, MR plus 4, MR plus, even if it was plus 1, I would still think that this is a great weapon. Speed is a really strong weapon to have. It is a very high damage brand, and especially so on a heavier weapon. It's really strong. And plus 4 is fine. Slay plus 2 is great. MR plus is, whoa, this thing is great. This is the run. If this was my speedrun weapon, I would not at all be sad. This would be a great weapon to have a speedrun in. So if I'm endorsing it that much, you should really do it. You should really use this. Alright, that's all I've got to say for today. It's been 30 goddamn minutes. This is a very long video. I might try to shorten this down into a bite-sized content video later, but I think that it's good to have this discussion right now. So there you go. So that's all for today. So you can leave, but I just want to say quietly to those that are still watching, you know, if you like this kind of content, please leave a like. I don't have much in the way of likes. I can't feed my family with these likes. There's not enough, guys. Please spare me the likes. But in seriousness, if you actually do enjoy this kind of content, I do understand that I was not supposed to talk for 27 minutes, but when you think about how much content I had to go through, that's not horrible, I guess. I don't know. Maybe I'm just really good at presentation, but essentially, the idea that I'm trying to do, that I'm trying to get with this week, is trying to solve a lot of early problems that people will have. It's really in depth. It works as a straight up like massive resource that people can look at and they'll answer the question basically forever. They won't need to ever like rely on another resource. That's what I'm trying to do with these videos. They might come out a little long. I don't want them to be this long, but it's hard. It's really tough. I might consider compartmentalizing these a little bit more, just so they're shorter, but yeah, let me know what you think. Let me know what you guys want from me in terms of these kind of videos, because I've started producing or planning the production of some of these additionally, and I might be doing them tomorrow, or I might be doing speedruns tomorrow. But basically, like, this is the kind of stuff that I'm looking for. So if you like this, please leave a like, please subscribe, please whatever. There's gonna be more of this. Like, honestly, I think that this is missing from YouTube, and it needs to be said. So yeah, there you go. So anyway, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you all tomorrow.